They talk about blood curdling and all that, but that coming from your daughter, you don't ever want to hear. I'll never forget that sound. My wife and 12-year-old daughter were coming back from a volleyball practice very locally, maybe a mile and a half away. She had dropped off a bunch of my daughter's friends in the neighborhood, sort of a carpool situation. So zigzagged around, dropped some kids off, and then pulled into the driveway. And she sat in the garage for a little bit. They were talking about kind of what to have for dinner. They both got out of the car, closed the garage. The garage is detached, as you can probably see from the video. And my daughter was slightly ahead of my wife, and two men came down the driveway, kind of made a turn. My wife turned to look at them, and she actually at first thought they were my son's friends. I have a son who, thank God, wasn't here. He's at a religious retreat overnight, believe it or not. He's 15. They all wear hoodies, and so she thought it was them. They pulled guns and ran at her. Clearly was not. She screamed. My daughter ran inside the back door. She was very courageous, slammed the back door. You can see in the video where one of the guys was coming at her, but then turned back around once the door got slammed. I know all that from the video and from my wife, but then sort of what I know firsthand is, my daughter screamed, and
And you were inside the house.
I was inside the house. I was 15 feet away, just kind of sitting, and the scream. They talk about blood curdling and all that, but that coming from your daughter, you don't ever want to hear. I'll never forget that sound. So clearly jumped up, ran. All she could yell was robbers, and then I ran outside. All I saw was sort of my wife on the ground and a couple people in black with their back turned. I ran toward them. I yelled something. They both turned immediately. One, I'm going to get this wrong, I don't know much about guns, cocked their gun, I don't know, chambered around, and ran toward me. And where one was yelling, shoot his ass. Yeah, and so I stopped and offered money and a wallet, which seemed to work for a minute. And then they asked me, like they were asking my wife, where are the keys? Where are the keys? Open the garage. Where are the keys? I didn't understand what they wanted at first, but they kind of took me, put a gun to my head, went back, and my wife's trying to open the garage. She's yelling at them, the keys are in my purse, the keys are in my purse. They're looking through my wife's purse. They can't find anything in my wife's purse. No one can. But yeah, and so I basically just said, why don't you take my car? The keys are in my car. Just take it. Just press the button. They couldn't figure out how to start the car. I told them how to start the car. Then they wanted the key. I told them where it was. They still wanted me to give it to them. It's a fob. They didn't need that. I don't think they understood. So I went in the car, handed them the key fob. One guy is still, my wife is telling him to take both cars. They then take my wife and push her down again next to me. The one guy yells at the other guy that he's stupid and we shouldn't take both cars, so they eventually both jump in my car and leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can, even looking at the video, I can see you both just breathing heavily, like just realizing what just happened. I mean, for this to happen right outside your home, that's the most troubling thing for you all, I'm sure. And even the fact that they were so just brazen. But what stood out to you when you look at them? Were they young? What stands out to you as you think about them committing this crime?
A couple things. Yeah, I mean, obviously in our backyard where, your home is supposed to be safe, right? But also in this community. that we don't generally see that. And you know, I travel for work, and I say I'm from Chicago, and I'm sure as many people have experienced, oh, you're from Chicago because they've seen the news, and I would defend it, and I would say, no, that's just the news. There's a lot of stuff, but it doesn't really affect me or a lot of people, but it does now, and it's in a community that I never would have thought this would happen, but that was ignorant, because it did. And when you say brazen, I think that's what stands out to me, that there was no fear when they came at me, and I looked at them, that they weren't afraid. I mean, I'm not small. I came running directly at them, and the thought wasn't, oh no, let's get out of here. It's, let's turn around and potentially shoot this person. And they weren't worried about time, really, until the very end, maybe, but they weren't worried about time or me or consequence, I guess, or anything. And they weren't, you know, people have asked me, oh, were they on drugs? They were not. They were very clear. They frankly dressed fairly well. The guns they had looked like these were professional criminals that had no fear.
How many, so each of them had a weapon?
Yep.
Okay. Another thing that stood out to me is a lot of times police tell you, if you're ever in that situation, just don't fight them. And it just seemed like you and your wife were very much like, take whatever you need. But in that moment, how did you even get to that point? Like, what was going through your mind at that point?
Well, I'll just speak from my mind. I don't know exactly what was going through my wife's mind, but initially in my mind, it was just a reaction to a scream and get to wherever that danger was and try to stop it. Quickly turned to essentially, I don't want to be shot. Like I clearly was not going to do anything about this. There was two guns pointed at me, pointed at my wife, and so it was just do whatever we can do to sort of dispatch the threat, which was take whatever of value you want and leave. So that was sort of, I guess, the thought. If there was a thought, it was a lot of reactions. Yeah.
How are you and your wife doing? How are your kids doing? It's still about a week removed, but.
Yeah. So, you know, it's. I got some good advice from someone at work, and that was just to kind of take it day by day, and that's sort of what we're doing, day by day, hour by hour. Like, you know, get dressed, have dinner, whatever. My wife and daughter are getting better every day, but it's a trauma, and you don't know what that is going to do. I think a lot about my daughter, and you know, what is this going to mean a week, a month, a year, 2 years from now? And so we're seeking all the professional help that we're supposed to. I think we're doing. There's no playbook for this outside of make sure that we're talking about it. And you know, I think doing things like this is helpful, because it takes us from being extremely vulnerable and scared to, you know, fighting back in some way and trying to make sure this doesn't happen to another family.
Yeah, you said that you're a private family. You usually wouldn't step up and say something, but you decided to make sure that everybody knows. You want people to know what happened to you.
Yeah, we don't want to do this. No offense. We don't want to share this story. We don't want to be on television and things, but I just, you see what's happening, you know, in our community now, and we, first of all, our community has been unbelievable, and we would really want to thank all of them, the support, the food, everything that our community, and that's why we're here, is because of the people, and yeah, and our thought is, if it's here, then it could be our neighbors who we care a lot about, right? Our community. And if there's something, anything that we can do to help stop this, we want to do it, even if it makes us uncomfortable. It feels like the right thing, even though it's not the comfortable thing for us.
And just the last thing, what does police told you so far, investigators?
Police told us that they actually were able, they got here quick enough that they were able to see them essentially leaving, and were able to chase them for a certain amount of time. But there was, they were going very fast, apparently 90 some miles an hour down essentially a residential street, 95th Street. And there's essentially a cost benefit analysis that they have to do to continue to do that. So they got away, and they're telling us that, and not just, and they being multiple detectives, our alderman, the commander of the district. Like I get calls all the time, so communication is certainly there, and they're telling us that they're doing everything they can to catch them, and I believe that.